Hello and welcome to the View From the Vic, our official Watford Football Club podcast. I'm Jon Marks and I'll be with you every week to bring you a unique insight into life at Vicarage Road, as well as reliving great memories and hearing untold stories from special guests, including Hornet stars past and present. I'll be joined shortly on this week's View From the Vic by midfielder Will Hughes, former midfielder Paolo Vernazza and Kevin Affleck, who works at the club as a media consultant. Now, if you missed the news earlier in the week, we have confirmed the signing of Pape Gueye, who has signed a 5-year deal effective from July the 1st. The French midfielder, who's 21, will join at the expiry of his contract with Le Havre in the summer and has already represented France at under 18 and under 19 levels. Away from football, Vicarage Road continues to be an extension of Watford General Hospital, of course, and we're supporting the great work of the NHS staff and key workers by providing meals, meeting rooms, reflective areas, bedrooms and washing scrubs for the staff. Plus, this week, a new outpatients maternity unit opened in the sensory room. We can all help during this crisis, of course, and the best way remains to stay at home, which will protect the NHS and ultimately save lives. We've got plenty to keep you entertained on this week's podcast, plus lots more on our new website at watfordfc.com. Do check that out, and across our social media channels, of course, too.
From the edge of the penalty area, absolutely thumps it into the roof of the net.
Now, I'm delighted to be joined on the View From the Vic by our trio of guests. So, hello and welcome to Will Hughes. Hi, Will.
Evening, John. Good to be on.
Paolo Vernazza. Paolo, great to have you with us.
Nice to be on, John. Thanks for having me.
And of course, as always, Kevin Affleck. Kev, how are you?
Hi, John. Yeah, looking forward to this one.
Gents, thanks very much for joining me. I hope you're all well and staying safe. First things first, what is the link between our current midfielder and our former midfielder? Will, would you like to tell us how you're connected to Paolo?
Paolo is my agent at the moment.
At the moment, Jesus. That's a great start.
Paolo, how on earth did you become his agent?
It's funny, I met Will as a young 17-year-old at Derby. Let's just say to get conversation out of him then is a lot more difficult than it is now.
Will, what's he like as an agent and why did you choose Paolo?
I remember being a scholar at Derby and we had a little run in the Youth Cup. We played Arsenal, we beat them 1-0 and then suddenly a lot of agents came flocking to our team and I'm not sure Paolo was at that stage, but I was told by Nigel Clough at the time, who was the first team manager, to stay away from agents because he was a bit sceptical of them, which is right. And then we had Man United in the next round and obviously because we'd gone on a decent run, it gained traction. And again, a lot of agents were in and around the youth team squad at that time. So it did take a while for him to get through to me, but eventually he did. Nigel, at the time, warned me against signing with any, and I agreed with him. And then a week later, I actually signed with an agent, and he found out and came down at half-time when we were playing United in the Youth Cup. Gave me a bit of a telling off, as to say. And then I think it was 3 days later, you get a cooling off period with agents. So I ripped up that contract. So that's why.
That's what actually gave me my in, wasn't it? Because I weren't about at them times.
Yeah, but it always made me wary of agents for that reason.
Could you see straight away, Will, how important it was though to have an agent? And have you sort
Not
of grown?
No, I'll be honest with you. When coming through the ranks at Derby, with, as I said, Nigel being the first team manager, he was very against agents, and that's all I knew at the time. That's all I believed, and I trusted him in what he said, understood his point of view.
Hello, is Will one of those players who calls you to change a light bulb and gets you to pay his utility bills?
No, do you know what? To be fair to him, he is low maintenance. With Will, he doesn't really want much to be done for him, to be honest with you. I think it's more, we've got a relationship now where I suppose I'm more of a support network to him more than anything else, apart from all the contractual stuff, the things that go with it. We've become quite close, talk about anything to do with football down to family life.
Give the listeners an insight into his character. Is he as dry and as spiky with you as he is with us?
Here we go.
Yeah, he's consistent. Put it that way, he's consistent. You'll see the same Will Hughes that I'll see. He's got a witty, dry sense of humour, but he's his own character. No, he's fine, really.
He's hard work, but he's a good lad underneath, isn't he?
Kev, you're trying to entice me into saying something wrong here, aren't you?
Kev, you've been a bit touchy all day. Don't let it affect this podcast, please.
Well, you mentioned like at the time, you didn't necessarily want an agent, or you say Nigel Clough was against him. But as you've worked with Paolo, for say 7-8 years now, has the sort of the importance of that relationship grown on you? And do you feel that now you have got that support network that Paolo mentioned?
Yeah, massively. As I grew up, I realised playing more football and speaking to more fellow players that you do in fact need an agent, whether that's for contractual stuff or just being there, as Paolo just mentioned, as a support network. And I think over the years it's become more of that as opposed to the contract side of it, which is brilliant for me.
Paolo, does it help your relationship that you played at the top level and were a midfielder as well?
Well, listen, I was at the top level for a short period of time, and it's funny because in the early years, I always used to give Will a little bit of stick and used to set him targets saying, right, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And he surpassed in most of the things that I'd done, which wasn't much. I don't think there's anything else for him to go and do at the moment.
It did take me a few months to realise that Paolo actually did play football, because I didn't believe him at first, and he had to prove it and send me pictures.
Paolo, have you passed on any goal scoring tips?
Listen, if we talk about goals, I know I never scored many goals, but Will doesn't score many anyway. So that's one thing that we're both consistent on.
Talking of goals, before we move on, that's the subject of our trivia teaser this week. So this is first time for everybody at home to put their thinking caps on and see if you can come up with the answer. We're going to go down the route of Will. So it's about Will, and we want to know, of the 12 goals Will scored in his time at Derby, how many came against Watford? The answer will come later on, but how many goals, whilst Will Hughes was at Derby, did he score against us?
You didn't need to mention 12, John.
Yeah, you played about 200 times, didn't you, for Derby?
Exactly.
Paolo, summer of 2017, talk us through the deal to get Will to Watford and the mechanics of how a deal like that works, because lots of our listeners won't quite kind of understand. I've been around kind of that environment where you move one player from one club to another.
To be honest with you, it wasn't a complex deal, and it came at a stage of Will's career where I think he'd be the first to admit that he probably needed a little bit of change. There'd been a lot of managers coming in and out of Derby. Sometimes a change is good. So it come at a point where the move was probably right for Derby because they cashed in on an investment and received some good money. And in exchange, Watford received a really good player that they saw a lot of potential in. I was obviously very close with Filippo at the time, having worked with the club for a number of years and having played for the club as well. It became an easy transaction, if you like, because of relationship. I'd known that Watford as a football club had always liked Will Hughes. The timing was perfect. Will was away with England at the time, wasn't you, Will?
Yeah, it was the Euros.
Yeah, so he was away with England and talks started progressing and I was keeping him informed of the dialogue. And then it got to a point where the clubs pretty easily, after 2 or 3 days, managed to agree a deal club to club, which was great. It then gave Watford permission to speak to Will. Filippo may have even had a conversation with Will at that time. And I came into the training ground and negotiated the contract for the next 5 years.
I know the personnel has changed enormously since your time at the club, Paolo. But is there always an appetite to place a player at one of your former clubs?
It's made me become closer with the club again, if I'm honest. So it's great to be around. And when you're going now on a Saturday and you're watching the games, it does bring back a lot of memories. It's good that the fact that it's half an hour down the road for me. Will's playing good football. The club have progressed enormously since I played there. I think they're on the upward curve for sure. So it was great to get a deal done locally with Watford, and hopefully there's a couple more to come.
Well, Will, you'd started out obviously at Derby at such a young age. Paolo mentioned there that time seemed to be right for you to move on. Obviously, there had been big change with managers there, and I guess perhaps a change of direction for Derby. How ready were you? You've been linked, I know, to a number of clubs. Were you looking, it's Premier League or nothing, I stay at Derby, or what were you feeling like at that point?
Paolo's right in what he said in terms of it was the right time for all parties. I'd kind of stagnated at Derby a bit. Gary Rowett was brilliant in terms of he was honest with me. I didn't fit into his plans as I'd hoped. So I think all round it just made sense for me to move on. And obviously, like you just said, there was a lot of talk over the previous years, and it got to the point where I just never thought it was going to happen. So for it to actually happen was a massive relief for me in the end.
How much did you know? I mean, you were away, as we've mentioned, with England under 21s at the time. Nathaniel Chalobah was your international teammate. Were you two talking? Because was he already aware that his transfer might be happening as well?
Yeah, from what I can remember, we definitely spoke about it. I don't know how much detail it was. I don't know how far down the line his transfer was. But yeah, he'd been down loan beforehand, so he was talking greatly at the club.
Will, did Paolo have to give you the hard sell to join Watford?
Not particularly. I was at a time where I needed to move, and Premier League to get that chance was a massive. Watford fitted the bill. He spoke really well of the club, having played for them and knew people there. I'd known a few players that had played there as well, so I'd spoke to them, and it just seemed right.
Paolo, you have a good relationship with Filippo, I hear. What's he like to deal with? I don't think I've ever seen anyone on the phone as much as him.
Filippo's great. He works really hard, and I know the club holds a close place in his heart, and it really means something to him. Sometimes I think it's easy that you don't see what people inside the clubs are actually doing. And, not just Filippo, but everyone who's working behind the scenes at that football club are trying to do things in the right way to, one, keep Watford in the Premier League, which is great, and to make them a sustainable Premier League club. So there's a lot of hard work that goes into it from top to bottom, and everyone deserves credit for where the football club is at the moment.
And Paolo, how much work do you put in sort of building relationships with clubs? I guess obviously your job is to manage players, and it'd be fascinating for you to tell us as well what sort of work goes into managing a player these days. But also say, how much work do you put into building relationships with individual clubs and people like Filippo?
So building the relationships is key. Like, a lot of people think that the agency world is about sitting by a phone and cold calling 20 managers in the Premier League to see if you can get a deal done. But it's not. It is about relationships. So people won't see the hard miles that you put in travelling up and down the country, because I believe that you have to go and meet people face to face in order to build a relationship. It's not done on a telephone anymore, and you can't get a feel for that person if you're not face to face. So there's been a lot of travelling. Sometimes it's to the detriment of your family life, which is difficult. But you're telling these players that you're going to give them a service, and so you need to fulfil it. And I'll be honest, most of the clients we look after, they appreciate the work that you do for them. It's very, very rewarding in the end.
Paolo, can you remember your own move to Watford back in 2000, I think it was? How did it come about?
I do, actually. So
I wasn't born then.
It was a strange one, because I'd actually agreed to sign for Norwich. It was a Sunday evening, and I had a car coming to collect me on Monday morning to take me up to Norwich Stadium to sign the paperwork and to officially register as a Norwich player. I think it was about 8 o'clock on the Sunday evening. I got a phone call from Tom Wally. Tom was obviously my youth team manager at Arsenal, and I got on really well with Tom. To this day, I'll still see him at Vicarage Road. He still goes along there. And he rang me and said, "Look, the gaffer's got an interest in meeting you. Will you come along to the stadium?" It happened as quick as that, really. Myself, my agent and my dad at the time went and met Graham Taylor at Vicarage Road, with permission from Arsenal, of course. We had the conversation, we'd done a deal there and then, and there was a handshake that I would come in the next morning and sign as a Watford player, which was pretty tricky because now I've agreed to sign with 2 clubs. So for me, I was so far out of my comfort zone as a player, and I didn't like letting anyone down. So it was a bit nerve-wracking for me to think, right, how am I going to deal with this situation? And I actually never dealt with it. And it's one of the regrets in my life that I never picked up the phone personally and told Norwich that I'd made a decision to go someone else. I allowed my agent to do it at the time because I thought that was the right thing to do. And look, it may have been at the time the right thing, but I wish I'd picked up the phone and just said, look, for all sorts of reasons, location, etc., I've decided to sign for this club. But like I say, yes, a regret that I never done it at the time.
Difficult to turn down Norwich, but I guess it was equally difficult to turn down Graham Taylor. Just how persuasive was he, and how did you find him?
Listen, I got on really well with Graham. He was like one of the last old school managers that literally ran the club from top to bottom, and he was great to be around. He was enthusiastic. He had very dry, witty banter, as we all know. And it was a special period. And I think I had about a year with him at the time before he decided to retire, which was funny in itself, the last game.
A quick reminder of our trivia teaser question this week. Sorry, Will, you only scored 12 goals for Derby, but in all those appearances. But we want to know how many of those 12 were scored against the Hornets. Will, you made your debut at a very young age. You said it was a fairly easy decision coming to Watford. You know, as I say, that when we research you, they're saying you're linked with Manchester United and other clubs. Do you sort of shut that noise out from, people in the media? Are you able to just sort of focus on what you want and what's best for you?
Yeah, I meant easy decision in terms of going to the Premier League from the Championship. Obviously, it was very difficult to leave somewhere where I'd grown up and come through the academy. So in that sense, it was difficult. There was always paper talk. Ever since I was 16, when I made my debut, the papers can make whatever they want up, regardless of whether it's true or not. So I had to deal with that at an early age, and the more it happened, the more immune I became to listening to it and believing it. So I didn't let that affect me at all.
Do you read papers now, out of interest? Sky Sports News is on in the training ground every day. It's hard to ignore it, isn't it?
But I don't tend to read papers through football or the media gossip anymore.
You're too busy watching your montage on YouTube, aren't you, Will? We put out for your birthday?
That's not very long, is it?
Paolo, obviously after Graham Taylor came Gianluca Vialli, and huge change at the club. His season didn't work out the way that anyone wanted it to, but what was he like? What was it like playing for him?
I really enjoyed playing under Gianluca personally, and I know in terms of the football club, the period with Gianluca there probably wasn't seen as one of the best periods that Watford have had. But on a personal level, I've got nothing but high affection for Gianluca, and I really enjoyed my time under him and Ray Wilkins in particular. I thought they were two great guys. I do think eventually they would have got it right. I think that we probably just made a lot of change too soon and too quick and tried to change the identity of the football club and the brand of football, etc. But I do think they would have got it right eventually. And look, we all know that this is a results-driven game. So unfortunately, you're 6 games from being a hero and then 6 games from getting a sack. As the players, we needed to probably do more in ourselves. But like I said, it was a bit of a transitional period where people were starting to understand a new way of playing that probably never worked for us as well as everyone would have hoped.
Paolo, around the same time as you, David Noble came over the fence to Watford. What a talented player he was.
Yes, and Nose was unbelievable. Ray used to call him Zidane, and he would actually do some outrageous things in training. I think he found it a little bit tough because he'd come from Arsenal with high hopes, and obviously you come over to the Championship, and I certainly saw how different playing reserve team football was to all of a sudden playing Championship football week in, week out, and it's frantic. And Nobes took a little bit of time adjusting to the pace of it, but you saw him in training all the time, and his first touch, his passing, he had everything in his locker. And he's probably one who should have done more with his career. And me and David are really close still, and we talk about these type of things all the time. But yeah, he had some ability for sure.
You've both changed divisions, different mentality, I guess, because Paolo, you were dropping down, as you say, to the Championship. Will, obviously, I guess the excitement, you wanted to step up. Everybody's got, I assume, that Premier League dream. Question for both of you, really, but obviously you have to adjust. And Will, perhaps, have you got to have that self-belief, that confidence that you can do it, you can make that step up?
Yeah, definitely. It's changed a bit from when Paolo was playing. The longer it went on...
These underhand comments all the time.
I think the longer it went on at Derby, my ambition was to get into the Premier League with Derby, but the longer it went on, the more I felt, is it going to happen? Am I just going to be in the Championship for the rest of my life? It was difficult when I first made the jump up to have that self-confidence, but you become to realise that there's a reason why clubs bought you and put faith in you, so you must have something about you.
Paolo, that mentality of you're at a club like Arsenal, and as you say, Watford and Norwich come in, have you got to get your head round, my time at Arsenal is up, and you're a young man, I guess you want to play at the highest level possible, but you've got to make that career decision?
It was quite strange for me at the time, actually, because I was 21 years old. The season I left, I think I left and joined Watford in December of that year. I'd got to a stage where I'd been on the bench literally every game bar 4 or 5 in that early part of the season with Arsenal. But I had this real ambition and drive in me to go and play regularly because I couldn't dislodge two of the best midfielders in the world in Manu Petit and Patrick Vieira. I look back now, and that was no crying shame that no one would have done that at the time. So I decided to make the drop down. I just couldn't stop dropping down. And I kept going down and down and down. It never stopped. But no, it was difficult. It was a really, really tough decision at the time because I was an Arsenal fan. I grew up watching the club, but it was made so much easier the fact that I was going back to my old training ground, if you like. So the training ground that Watford use now at London Colney, that's where we trained with Arsenal. And then we obviously moved over for 2 years in the new complex next door. And then it was just like coming back over. But this time it wasn't in porter cabins. There was actually changing rooms there.
We've been talking goals. I think you scored twice in your time at Watford, but one's a memorable one because it was actually the last goal scored for Watford under Graham Taylor before he retired from management. Away at Gillingham in a 3-0 win.
Interesting.
Can you remember it?
Yeah, I do actually. I remember it clearly. Like I said earlier on the outtakes, there weren't many, so I remember that one clearly. I think my other one was Sheffield Wednesday away, where it was a bit of a scuffed hit. But this one was, it was pretty special. I enjoyed it. I think I dropped the shoulder on someone and ended up hitting it into the roof of the net. You would have been proud of it, Will.
Get on YouTube, everybody, and have a look. Gillingham 0, Watford 3. It's worth a watch. I think we're going to know the answer to this one. Will, come in with your favourite goals so far with us?
There's not many. Probably the Burnley away.
Hughes going for it. Oh, it's a fantastic goal. Burnley gifted possession to Watford, and then Will Hughes stepped forward and did the rest.
I thought Fulham at home. But
better than the volley.
Yeah.
In terms of like the feeling, definitely Burnley away because we'd taken an early lead. They replied quickly, and as everyone knows, it's such a difficult place to go to. So I think everyone was assuming that Burnley would go on to win that, and we scored 2 quick goals after half time. One was mine, so that feeling beating them away from home was really good.
On a more serious note, not long after you joined the club in 2001, there was an incident at a place in Hackney when you were stabbed. A lot of time has passed since then. What's your recollection of that incident?
Look, it was a really unfortunate part of my career, my life, and you probably look back at it now and realise that it had more of an impact than you actually realise at the time. You try to get yourself back fit as soon as possible. And I think I managed to get back in about 3 months. But you never really deal with it. Back then, I don't think you really speak about what's happening. It was like sort of a closed conversation after it happens. And now I suppose there's a lot more support networks and people that you talk to about these sort of things. But look, it happened. It was very, very unfortunate. I was stabbed in the leg at the time. But physically, I did heal. But I do think it had some sort of impact on my career in a whole, because I don't think I ever really got back to the levels that I'd been playing at maybe before I got injured.
Just explain, if you wouldn't mind, exactly what happened. You were with a former youth team colleague at Arsenal, Andrew Douglas, and it was a burglary, was it?
It was a burglary at my mum and dad's house. Yeah, it was an unfortunate position to be in when you come face to face and you confront a burglar. And the next thing you know, that your best friend's been stabbed twice and you've also been stabbed in the leg. My actual situation was nowhere near as bad as Andrew's. Will know Andrew very well because we worked together as well. His situation was pretty bad, yeah. It was life-threatening. It wasn't a nice period for sure. Everyone at the football club was amazing as well. So I remember Terry Byrne coming down to the hospital at the time, who was the general manager. The doc was there. Players had come down. It showed how together the football club is, I think, because it did make me realise that there's some really good people at the football club at that particular time.
Will, it's a remarkable story, really. Have you spoken to Paolo about it and Andrew Douglas?
Yeah, we spoke about it in depth before, and as Paolo said, it's a horrific thing, and you can't imagine. You can never say how you'd feel unless you've been in that situation. So it's unimaginable.
Well, obviously, very different circumstances. Injuries are part and parcel for a footballer, of course. And you've had your fair share. You were 20 years old at Derby, and you did your cruciate ligament, obviously, and a really, really serious injury for a footballer. How did you bounce back from that? How did you deal with that at the time?
I'm not sure when it actually was. I think it might have been 5 or 6 years ago under Paul Clement at Derby. It was the first game of the season, 30 minutes in, and then bang, my knee's gone. Didn't actually think I'd done anything major at the start, because I thought it was just the ball hitting me. But after 30, 40 seconds, you realise you've actually done something serious. So mentally, it did affect me, knowing that you're out for the rest of the season. And physically, obviously, being out for 8-9 months is difficult. And you never think you're going to get back to the ability you were before. But thankfully, my operation, my rehab went smoothly, and I was able to come back after 7 months, I think it was.
Will, how frustrating was the one you picked up against Aston Villa, I think, in December, because you were going great guns there, weren't you? Any
injury is horrible. It was a bit of a strange one. It was on my oblique, which I didn't realise you could actually injure. So I remember passing the ball, and it felt like I just got a massive tear on the side of my hip. A few days after, I was in absolute agony, but thankfully it healed down in a month or so, which was more than I was expecting. But you have to get these things sorted the right way, otherwise you can be out for a lot longer than expected.
And you were playing really well then. Would you agree?
Yeah, I was really enjoying my football. When the gaffer came in, he made a slight change in my position, which I don't think anyone was expecting, really, myself included. I think a few people were a bit hesitant, but I've really enjoyed it and took to that position really well.
When Nigel came in, we saw a change in goalkeeping coach, and Graham Stack came in. Paolo, with you on, it would be remiss of you not to talk about Mr. Stack. There's really not a bigger character in the game, is there?
Stacky's a great lad. He's very infectious. He's good around the lads. He's the type of player that you want in your changing room as a player, as a staff member. And I think he's been like that all through his career. If you go through all the clubs he's had, every one of his teammates would probably say, like, what a character. Like I said, he's really infectious, and he brings the best out of people. Like, he sets himself high standards and he works his nuts off, but he's also prepared to get the group together and mix in with the boys and be part of the banter. But he's a good one, Stacky.
Will, what's he like in the changing rooms?
Yeah, I think Paolo's just summed it up there. You need these sorts of characters on the coaching staff. All the lads respect him. He brings a lot of banter, like Paolo said, and makes all the boys laugh, which is half the battle. You've got to keep the players happy. He gets them all going before games. He's very vocal, and I think you do need that.
Just before we move on, final reminder for those of you listening at home for our trivia teaser question. Will scored 12 goals for Derby. How many of those? You know, it feels like some players, us as supporters, always score against your team. Is that the feeling you had when you watched Will Hughes playing against us? Or was it not? Don't help them out, Will. Don't help them out.
I actually don't even know the answer to this question, so I'm intrigued.
Do you know the answer, Will? Don't say it. Do you know the answer?
Yeah, of course I do.
You do?
I hope I do.
You hope you do. Okay, so how many goals did Will score for Derby against Watford? The answer to follow shortly.
Will, no sportsman likes losing, but it seems to particularly great with you. I remember you being in a foul mood after the defeat at Liverpool and the draw at Brighton. Is that because you care, or you're a born winner, you're going to tell me?
I think more because I care. Obviously, everyone wants to win. But when I'm angry after games, it's for a number of reasons, whether that's because the team hasn't played well, or I'm nitpicking on my own performance of where I could have done better myself. So the only time I'll have a smile on my face is if we've won the game.
You've also got that lovely edge to you as well. I remember you had that running battle with, was it Alonso against Chelsea? I think you kicked the fella by Leverkusen in pre-season, and then you got under the nose of Wijnaldum against Liverpool. Do you enjoy getting under their skin?
It's not something that I do on purpose. It just happens in the heat of the moment, and you have to smile on the pitch and enjoy these battles, because that's what it's all about. I think it's gone out of the game a lot over the last 5-10 years.
Will just loves tackling now.
Isn't that great? Because that's gone out. That's going out of the game, Paolo, isn't it? So it's good to have someone that likes to tackle.
I'm guaranteed to get a text message if I'm not at the game between 5:15 and 5:30 saying 6 tackles, 8 tackles. It's a win for him. It's a win. The game has changed.
8 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I'd be that type of player now, but I've had to move with the times.
Paolo, how would you describe Will as a player?
Do you know what? I've seen a complete transformation in the player from 17 years old to where he is now. And there's no right or wrong way to how you're going to have a career. It's about how you just maximise your talent to be the best that you can be. And I saw Will as a young player playing as a 10, as an advanced 8, and he was always one who was looking to get on the end of things, thread the final pass, be intricate in his play, and he got high praise for it. And then he moved to the Premier League and he had to find a way to break into the Watford team. And at the start of his Watford career, I think everyone will realise he was playing out wider in a position that was unfamiliar to him, but he would always do a good job for the team. And that's why he was picked by the managers, because they could rely on him. I think when Will referenced it earlier, that when the new manager Nigel came in and asked him to play in a much deeper role, I think it certainly suited him. And I think he started to form a really good partnership with Capoue, and they complement each other really well. And it gives the likes of Doucouré the energy and to go and express himself and use his legs to get about the pitch and be the first to press.
Will, just on your tackling, for any aspiring midfielders listening to this, I think a lot of people might think it's about go crashing around and steaming into people, but is it more about reading the game and intercepting when it comes to tackling these days?
I try to do that as well.
But yeah, Will runs into people. He's good at it.
I think first and foremost, reading the game's obviously the most important when it comes to that. But if you want to ruffle some feathers, you've got to try and run into people at the same time. Best of both worlds.
You're a fierce competitor, and I've seen it at table tennis at the training ground. Who's better, by the way, you, Capoue, or Isaac?
Isaac? Have you played against him?
He killed me.
Is this your own standards now, Kevin?
I'd probably say Caps is number one. We had a tournament last year, and I think he won it, so he's probably number one.
Is he just one of these annoying blokes who's just good at everything?
Yeah, he's up there with everything we played, darts, pool.
Yeah, I think he beat Maps in the final, didn't he, with the table tennis?
Yeah, Maps is up there, Klebs is up there. Klebs, again, is one of them. He's good at all sports, it seems.
I remember the reaction when he got knocked out of the pool tournament. Was it by Pereyra? That was
yeah, he was one of the favourites, so it got a bit of a crowd, that one, and I think he succumbed to the pressure in the end.
He did. He took it very, very well, I have to say. But you're right. I've never seen the Canteen so quiet and so concentrated on a moment whilst Maxie was trying to pot those final couple of balls. But yeah, it was a big roar, wasn't there? Paolo, what was your favourite Canteen pastime?
Well, we used to have that table tennis place. That table tennis still at London Colney when we was there. So I hope it's been upgraded now.
There's carpet on the floor at least, yeah.
No, do you know what? It looks so different actually. When I walk into London Colney now, it's completely different to how it used to be, and they've done it up really, really well. It looks like a proper Premier League club now, which is good. Before we just had literally a canteen, and then I think even some of the ladies that do the dinner were still there not so long ago when I popped in.
Lynette has been there for, Lynette. I think 30 plus years now, Lynette. So, yeah, it's good to have friendly faces, isn't it, when you pop back?
You know, I remember you.
Will, going to ask you about working with Nigel Pearson. You came across him for a short period at Derby. Has he changed at all, or is he still wielding that big stick?
Yeah, I think he has changed a bit. From when I was there, I've changed dramatically as a person and as a player, so it's worked out well, and he's always had that fierce streak about him. But it was a good number of years ago that he was at Derby.
Did he come straight away and say, "Listen, Will, come into my office and identify you straight away as this tough tackling midfielder on day one"?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he was a bit hesitant because of his time at Derby. As I said, I was a completely different player, so I'm not sure what he was expecting from me, but he was really open and honest about what he wanted from me, and thankfully it's worked out well so far.
Paolo, from afar, looking in, the job that Nigel's done so far, you know, the change that he's made at Watford, how do you view that, and Does it leave us in you think we're Watford in good hands under Nigel?
Yeah, I really do, actually. I think looking out to win, he's come in and done a tremendous job. And I think what he's done more than anything is bring a talented group together that weren't probably pulling in the same direction. You can see there's a togetherness now, the way they're playing, and some of the performances that they've put in over the last 7-8 games were tremendous. I think everyone would highlight the Liverpool game as the biggest one, but I've seen some really, really top performances, and he seems to have got everyone on the same page and saying, look, this is a really, really good group of footballers that we've got here, but if we work 10% harder, we're going to get out of this mess. And it certainly looks like everyone's up their levels. I've seen some really good performances from certain individuals, and like I said, as a team, they're playing collectively now and look hard to beat and exciting on the break.
Well, we'll hope that job can continue when football comes back, and of course that's not the priority right now. We're all the far bigger issues to deal with before we can start thinking about how the team looks when we all come back. Trivia teaser answer time, guys. Will, how many goals did you score for Derby against Watford?
You've made me doubt myself now. I'm pretty sure it's 1.
That's the answer I've got. Yeah.
I want a description of the goal, Will.
It was actually my first goal in professional football. Pride Park. It was Derby won 5-0.
5-1. We got a late consolation.
5-1.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. Shot came in. It deflected off the keeper, and I think it hit me more than anything, and just scrambled in. And then I didn't know what I did from then on.
Sure, you don't look at the stats and stuff. You actually had a very good record against Watford when you were at Derby. My stats show that you played 5 times against us. You won 4 of them and drew the other. So you must have, I don't know whether you knew it at the time, but you must have looked forward to playing Watford every time.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Derby, we had a few good games at Vicarage Road. I think the one we lost was actually at Pride Park.
It was only a draw. It probably felt like a loss.
It was a draw.
Because, yeah, that was the one when Watford got promoted and they had a man sent off just before half-time and Derby went 2-1 up, but then Watford equalised in the second half. But
I remember now.
Yeah, but a couple of good wins at Vicarage Road for you guys for Derby at the time. But a very good record, gents. We're just about out of time. We've thoroughly enjoyed having you both on. A different dynamic for us with player and agent. Paolo, it's great to reminisce with you and to hear you talking about Will. And Will, brilliant stuff. We appreciate your time. We hope that you're all staying safe and look after yourselves. And let's hope that sooner rather than later we can all be back in the same place.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for having me on, John and Kev.
Thank you to both. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Big thanks to Will and Paolo for joining us on The View from the Vic. We wish you and your families all the best. Stay at home, stay safe. Kevin and I will be back again next week with more Hornets guests. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Oi! There's plenty more to see here.